If you enjoy this video, please remember to subscribe if you haven't already. And if you like what you see on my channel and would like to support me on Patreon, click on the link below. Throughout the 1950s, the studio system was still in full effect, especially MGM Studios at Culver City, who still had the reputation of releasing quality films. Forbidden Planet was one of the first fully fledged science fiction movies for MGM Studios, and in 1956 the studio decided to hop on the science fiction bandwagon with Forbidden Planet, which would be one of the best all-time sci-fi space movies ever made, and absolutely one of the most groundbreaking films for its time. For example, it was one of the first science fiction films that would depict humans travelling faster than the speed of light in a starship. Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry even noted that Forbidden Planet was one of his inspirations for Star Trek. The influence is pretty obvious. Forbidden Planet would also be the first time a science fiction project had received a large budget. Forbidden Planet would also be the first film to be set entirely on another planet in interstellar space. And Robby the robot was one of the first film robots that actually had a personality. This would also be the first film to have a full electronic musical score, and the effects in this film were groundbreaking. MGM Studios, mostly known for bringing out musicals and message pictures, noticed during the 50s that science fiction was very popular with audiences and decided they better try their hand at producing a fully fledged science fiction film. Sure, MGM had developed films that touched on science fiction, but they were never fully sci-fi. The genre originally had never been taken seriously by studio executives, and sci-fi films generally received the smallest of budgets. The screenplay was conceived and written by Irving Bloch and Alan Adler in 1952. The screenplay was originally titled Fatal Planet and took place in the year 1976 on the planet Mercury, later changed to Altair 4. The story was about an Earth expedition headed by John Grant, who was sent to the planet to retrieve Dr. Adams and his daughter, Dorian, who have been stranded on the planet for 20 years. Grant is able to rescue both Adams and his daughter and escape the invisible monster stalking them. There were a number of changes made to the final script, but the plot was pretty much kept the same. Writers Bloch and Adler brought the script to Allied artists, but they would turn it down. They then decided to bring the screenplay to MGM, which at that time was Hollywood's most respected studio. Bear in mind, MGM had not produced a science fiction film since 1929 with the film The Mysterious Island. But studio head Dory Sherry greenlighted the project. Sherry was not a fan of science fiction, and he classed the film as a B picture. The later screenplay draft by Cyril Hume was renamed Forbidden Planet. Hume believed with a title like this, the film would have more box office appeal. The story of Forbidden Planet would also loosely be based on Shakespeare's The Tempest. In preparing for this film, the production team and MGM borrowed a print of the 1955 science fiction film This Island Earth from Universal Pictures for inspiration. MGM had restricted access to the sets during the construction and production to prevent the public from seeing the new innovations unveiled in the film. In casting the actors, Steve Forrest and John Erickson were offered the roles. They apparently were suspended from MGM after turning down the roles. Respected actor Walter Pidgeon was cast as Dr. Morbius. Actress Anne Francis was cast as Morbius's daughter, Altara Morbius.
We all, as actors, made it a point from the very beginning to take the story seriously and to play it for real.
Actress Anne Francis was a contract player at MGM and starred in the classic film Bad Day at Black Rock in 1955. She is mostly well known for starring in the classic Twilight Zone episode After Hours. Leslie Nielsen was cast as Commander John Adams. This was, in fact, Nielsen's film debut.
Fred Wilcox, who was the director, discussed the film with everybody working on it, and he said, "This is a serious film. and treat it like that.
Well-respected stage and film actor Warren Stevens was cast as Lieutenant Doc Ostro. Richard Anderson, later known for starring as Oscar Goldman in The $6 Million Man and The Bionic Woman, starred as Chief Quinn, while actor Earl Holliman played the comic relief as the ship's chef. But really, the main star and scene stealer was the famous Robby the Robot, whose main designer and uncredited builder was ex-washing machine designer Robert Kinoshita, whom with a 5-man team spent over 5 weeks producing thousands of designs and drawings of Robby the Robot. Robby the Robot was the first robot who actually had a personality and was the first robot design that was more mechanical and did not rely on a man being inside a robot suit. But Robby still required someone inside to control the robot, because he had so many moving parts to control. Robby the Robot was operated by stuntman Frankie Darrow. He was fired during filming after almost falling over while inside the expensive prop. At the cost of about $125,000, Robby the Robot was the most expensive film prop at this time. Robby the Robot, after Forbidden Planet's release, was such a popular character that he would go on, a year later, to star in the science fiction film The Invisible Boy in 1957. Robby's designer, Robert Kinoshita, was also art director for the TV series Lost in Space, and created and designed the B9 robot in Lost in Space, who had the similar features like Robby. Robby the Robot would appear in 2 episodes of Lost in Space. MGM Studios art department went all out, and the studio's art department head, Cedric Gibbons, pulled out all the stops, and the budget skyrocketed to $1.9 million, which would make the film one of MGM's most expensive productions at that time. Film sets were constructed on the MGM soundstage at Culver City. The film was shot entirely indoors, on the same stage where The Wizard of Oz in 1939 was shot. The set of the garden in Forbidden Planet is actually a reuse of the Munchkin Village set. All of the Altair 4 exterior scenes were sets, with the background being a matte painting, with visual effects added during post-production. The Starship C-57D was surrounded by a huge painted cyclorama featuring the desert landscape of Altair 4. This one set took up all of the available space in one of Culver City's sound stages. 89,000 square feet of soundstage was used, making the film one of the largest productions for MGM. Principal photography took place from April the 18th to late May of 1955. MGM originally had a full animation department, but by 1956 the department was largely dismantled. Forbidden Planet needed a lot of animation effects. Over 30 animation effects were used, including the animated id monster shots, laser beam shots, to electrical effect shots of Robby the Robot overloading. These animation effects shots were provided by Joshua Meador, who was on loan to MGM from Walt Disney. The electrical controlled passenger vehicle driven by Robby and the truck and tractor crane offloaded from the Starship were also constructed specifically for this film. Forbidden Planet had a budget of at least $1.9 million. For the sound effects, Lewis Barron constructed his own electronic circuits that he used to generate the score's bleeps, blurps, whirs, whines, throbs, hums and screeches. Most of these sounds were generated using an electronic circuit called a ring modulator. After recording the basic sounds, BB and Lewis Barron would manipulate the sounds by adding other effects such as reverberation and delay, and reversing or changing the speeds of certain sounds. BB and Lewis would also compose the fully electronic score for the film, which was something different that was not attempted on a soundtrack before. MGM studio head Dory Sherry actually discovered the couple by chance at a nightclub in New York City. Sherry would hire them on the spot to compose the film's musical score, as well as creating sound effects for the film. The couple's soundtrack would precede the invention of the Moog synthesizer in 1964. The trailer was narrated by Marvin Miller, who was also the voice of Robby the Robot. Shortly before the film was released, a novelisation was released in hardcover and paperback and was written by Philip MacDonald under the pseudonym W.J. Stewart. The novel delves much further into the mysteries of the vanished ancient alien race, the Krell, and Morbius's relationship to them. Forbidden Planet, when completed, was shown to a preview audience who loved it so much that the movie was released as it was, with no further changes. The famous poster for the film would show a menacing robot carrying a pretty girl. This type of film advertisement was a typical poster for a 1950s sci-fi monster movie. The robot Robby was nothing like he was in the poster, but was very likeable, and the scene on the poster was never depicted in the movie. Forbidden Planet had its world premiere at the Southeastern Science Fiction Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina on March the 3rd and 4th in 1956 and opened in more than 100 cities on March the 23rd. The film was shown in theatres in CinemaScope, which was a very popular film format during the 1950s. Critics and audiences loved the film. One critic wrote, "Imaginative, gadgets galore, plus plenty of suspense and thrills, make the production a top offering in the space travel category." One critic would call the film weird, but fascinating and exciting, and a highly imaginative production. According to MGM Records, the film initially earned well over $1.5 million in the US and over $1.2 million in Canada and over $1.2 million elsewhere, which resulted in a profit of $210,000. With the critical success of Forbidden Planet, it convinced the film industry that a well-funded science fiction project could be successful. The film influenced so much science fiction on film and TV, which really is an understatement. Owen Allen's TV show The Time Tunnel even pays tribute to Forbidden Planet in the pilot episode, featuring a matte shot of a huge underground building and people running across a walkway above a giant power generator. This scene was a homage to the Krell complex in the movie. Gene Roddenberry was even greatly inspired by the film in his creation of Star Trek. In fact, the planet Altair 4 was, according to Star Trek Deep Space Nine, a Federation planet. Robby the Robot was a successful character that would stay with us in popular culture to today, making appearances in many films and television shows to advertisements. In the 90s, there were even talks of remaking Forbidden Planet. They even suggested that the director of The Empire Strikes Back, Irvin Kershner, would direct the project, with Anthony Hopkins as Dr. Morbius, but the financing fell through. More remakes until 2007 have been discussed with many directors, like James Cameron, but nothing ever came of it. If they did remake the film, which I'm not fully opposed to, they should expand the story, looking more into the ancient alien race, the Krell. Forbidden Planet was a major influence to science fiction writers and filmmakers alike. I saw this film on TV many years ago in the 80s, when I was a kid, and was instantly spellbound by the film. The effects, though dated today, still look amazing. I have so much to say about this film. My name's JonnyBaak. Thanks for watching, and please have a look at my other latest video on Robby the Robot.